Hey guys, D-Liao here with a beginner's guide on how to complete your first Slay the Spire run as Ironclad. Today I'll be highlighting some tips and tricks on improving your gameplay as well as common pitfalls to avoid. I'll also provide a straightforward deck build that can handle all enemy encounters. This game is full of RNG, so this might not be a 100% foolproof way to win, but I've had really high success rate with this method, bricking only 1 in 20 runs or so. Also keep in mind this game is in early access, so some of the things I talk about may change, but the overarching strategy should still apply. To start off, let's talk about Ironclad as a character. Ironclad begins with the standard 5 strikes, 4 defense, and a bash. Its starting relic is Burning Blood, which heals 6 HP after every combat. This allows you to play very aggressively. Whereas Silent focuses on poison, shivs, and setups, Ironclad shines in dealing upfront damage and ramping up on strength using skills like Spot Weakness and Limit Break. There's also other creative builds such as ramping block or combos around exhaust, but we won't be talking about those today. Drafting is the most important aspect of this game. Your playstyles depend on what cards you draft. In this guide, we'll be focusing on dishing out heavy hits by quickly ramping up in strength. The important concept emphasized here is deck speed. Your deck speed is basically how much damage you can pump out per hand on average in a fight. Our goal is to maximize speed by ramping up our strength to about 10 to 15 and dishing out finishing blows with attacks that scale well off strength. A common mistake here is overdrafting cards and slowing down your deck speed. If you draft multiple cards that don't immediately synergize with your deck speed will be too slow and you'll lose too much health to enemies. This is most noticeable in the third floor against elites and the final boss, where the monsters there are a lot faster with their own strength ramp and every card you play needs to be high impact. So skip cards if you don't think they will help you later on. Here's a list of cards that are core to our build and our top priority. You should focus on drafting them in this order. We draft Limit Break, Spot Weakness, Demon Form, Inflame, and Flex to help gain strength. We then draft Headbutt to go fetch them after we use them. Finally, we use Heavy Blade and other multi-hit cards such as Pummel or Twin Strike to finish off our enemies. Both Heavy Blade and multi-hit cards scale really well off strength. You want to aim for at least 1 to 2 AoE cards such as Cleave or Whirlwind early on. These will be really useful in the first 2 floors where there are multiple enemies in a single encounter. Here's a list of other goodies to pick up that aren't core but are nice to have. They're pretty rare, so don't fret if you don't get many, but they do make clearing a lot easier. These are in no particular order. And lastly, these are examples of cards to avoid, mainly because they are too slow or don't synergize well with your deck. There are a lot more out there that aren't on this list, but you should use your best judgment to determine whether or not to draft them. Overall, you want to aim for roughly 20 to 25 cards, with no limit on the cards in the second list, which are just nice to have. These are rough guidelines, so as long as you keep in mind the synergies in your deck, feel free to experiment with different cards. At the Merchant, prioritize getting rid of curses such as Regret, Writhe, or Pain. Then buy cards that you need based on the previous section. As for neutral cards, they're generally not that great for this build since they don't synergize well, or they're just too slow. The one exception to this is Apotheosis. If you find that card early on, buy it immediately. It's simply too good to give up and will upgrade all cards in your deck. Though you should still upgrade Limit Break to make sure you can use it without exhausting it in case you draw it before Apotheosis. Remember, if you don't find anything eye-catching at the store, just save up your cash and wait for another shop. It's much better to get the best value for your money than to clutter your deck with low impact cards. Anything that provides mana is a must pick. They provide so much acceleration to your deck. Velvet Choker, Ectoplasm, Cursed Key, and Sozu are all great picks. Philosopher's Stone's a bit risky. If you have a solid deck, then it's fine to draft it. Otherwise, you might risk getting run down by enemies. Once you're more comfortable with enemy patterns, Runic Dome becomes the best out of all of them, since enemies in Slay the Spire are very predictable. If you don't get any mana relics, get whichever relic helps you out the most. For example, White Beast Statue is really reliable since potions are very flexible to use, and Runic Pyramid helps you hold onto cards like Spot Weakness and Limit Break. A general rule of thumb for resting is to always stay above 1/3 health normally, and 1/2 health for bosses and upgrade otherwise. Anything below that threshold, and you'll run the risk of getting RNG'd to death. Though if you have the relics and cards to allow you to play on low health, such as Reaper or Meat on the Bone, that threshold can vary a bit since you can heal as you go. Another thing I consider is my deck strength. If I have a mediocre deck and drafted some of my core cards and got maybe 1 or 2 rare cards, I'll definitely rest up before a final boss to be safe. But if I have like a ridiculous deck with multiple offerings, double tap, and a bludgeon, I'll be confident enough to go into a boss battle with lower health, and I'll use the last rest stop for an upgrade. Here's a priority list for upgrading our core cards. Notice how I don't upgrade Headbutt, we're mainly using it for the discard fetch effect. Also, Demon Form is upgraded last because its 3 mana cost makes it too slow for regular encounters, and its unupgraded version is usually good enough for drawn out battles such as bosses or elites. Lastly, if you find yourself with a relic that affects resting sites, like a shovel, use them only if you finish upgrading your core cards. Remember that deck strength is far more important than relics, as they are only a supplement. On the first floor, you want to encounter as many enemies as you can. They're simple to kill, and they help you farm for your core cards. If you get lucky and grab a few of your core cards, as well as some nice rare cards, you can try to take on the elites. This depends on how strong your deck is, as well as how healthy you are. Otherwise, path around them. Don't worry about missing a few relic opportunities, as cards are much more important than relics. Prioritize getting rid of curses and shops as fast as you can, because they can really build up and end up killing you. If you find yourself with greater than 250 gold, try to path towards a shop. Most good relics are around that price range, and some of the relics such as Bottle Lightning or Bag of Marbles can really accelerate your build. And lastly, if you find yourself with an already strong enough deck and don't really need more cards, or you're on low health and need to avoid enemies, you can path through mystery rooms and try to get lucky. You can find some really neat event relics and other bonuses that help you out. Though one mistake I see people making is taking only mystery rooms and finishing a floor with a really weak deck because they didn't have enough encounters to draft for cards. This will really hurt you later on in 3rd floor, as you won't be able to take down some of the more stronger enemies or elites. Thanks to Burning Blood, Ironclad can more willingly take damage during fights, as he will regen up to 6 missing HP after every combat. Strategically, this means players can worry less about preserving their health totals throughout the floor encounters, and instead focus more on dealing damage and ending encounters more quickly. For tougher encounters such as elites, bosses, or 3rd floor enemies, if you don't think you can end a fight fast in 3 or so turns, prioritize gaining strength using Inflame or Spot Weakness and Limit Break. This is definitely worth taking a bit of damage for, as it'll help you end the encounter faster in the long run. You also want to set up finishing kills by applying Vulnerability with your Bash. Make sure you constantly check your draw pile to see what you can get in the next few turns. For example, say you have a Bash in hand and you have 7 cards in your draw pile, and say you know you're guaranteed to draw into 3 strikes the next turn. It might be better to do Bash plus Strike to set up for 27 damage the next turn. But say you're only drawing into 2 strikes the next 2 turns. In this case, you want to strike up front for damage and block up. Lastly, since we're drafting Headbutt, try to play around it to quickly gain strength. If you have Spot Weakness and Headbutt in your hand, you can Spot Weakness and then Headbutt it back to have it next turn, and then gain a ton of strength. The same goes for Heavy Blade. If you have a ton of strength already, you can Heavy Blade then Headbutt it back for a 2-turn finisher on a tanky boss. For most bosses, you want to set up with strength gain early on while the boss doesn't deal as much damage, or doesn't summon as many minions. This means that you should liberally tank a few weak hits if it means getting more strength or dishing out a bit more damage. In general, if you follow the combat tips, you should have enough strength to finish a fight with Heavy Blade or Pummel. Try to take advantage of bosses' weaknesses. Here are some tips for bosses that make killing them easier. For bosses like the giant slime with the top hat, if he isn't immediately doing damage and is nearing his split point, consider waiting a turn to burst him down beyond his split point. This will interrupt him as well as cause him to split with the bursted down health, which makes killing the new slimes easier. The same strategy goes for the Guardian. Try to interrupt him when he's about to deal heavy damage, instead of trying to tank it. For the Awakened one, his second form is much stronger than his first. You should clear the other enemies first, and then focus on ramping up strength while blocking his damage. You can wait until you have enough strength to kill him in one shot, and then kill both forms with your Heavy Blade. This is probably the safest way to kill him. For Donu and Deka, focus on killing Donu to stop the enemy's strength gain. Be sure to take a bit of damage early on if you need the mana for other things. For Time Eater, make sure you keep an eye on the timer and constantly look through the draw pile to plan ahead. It might be worth it to hold on to strikes and defense to not advance the play count, since they don't do much anyways. For elites and bosses that summon minions, most will try to resummon minions the next turn if you kill one of them, so use that to your advantage to set up for turns to deal damage. The exception to this is the Bronze Automaton boss, which only summons minions once. Alright, and that's all for this guide. If you follow these tips and avoid the mistakes I highlighted in this video, you'll find climbing much smoother and faster. Hope this guide helps. Please leave a like or a comment if this guide worked for you, and subscribe for more Slay the Spire content. See you guys next time.